Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We promised that we will be reacting to all the NBA Finals games, and you know what? We have not yet reacted to Game 3, so here we go, Sap. We're going to kick right off with that as the Denver Nuggets seize a 2-1 lead, winning 109-94. Really controlled the whole game after the first quarter. Which was tied at 24 apiece, and then Denver continued to pull away, winning the subsequent next 3 quarters. In fact, Zap, it was the first time this series that Denver had won the fourth quarter. Granted, they won it by just 1 point, but the big story in this game, Sap, was the two stars of the Denver Nuggets, each going for a triple-double. Nikola Jokic going for 32, 10 assists, 21 rebounds, and Jamal Murray 34 points, 10 assists, 10 rebounds. Both of them were just spectacular. And the Heat had, a nice performance from Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo was really good, but didn't get enough from those role players that were so effective against the Celtics. And now Denver is the team in the lead.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I thought that Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo were okay. The problem with those guys, Jed, is they scored 50 points, which is good. They didn't get much support from those role players, but they took 45 shots to get to 50 points, and they only shot 40% from the floor. Conversely, the two stars from Denver combined to get 66 points, and they shot 56% from the floor, so they were far more efficient, which Nikola Jokic is such an efficient player. So the difference in that game was the duo in Denver, 66 points, the duo in Miami, 50 points. And that was pretty much the margin of victory. And, we've seen through this entire series, Denver's the better team. Miami somehow finds a way to hang in there. They win the close games, and they could do that tonight and even the series up at 2 games apiece. But the player I really want to talk about is Jamal Murray. I mean, we've a lot of plaudits for Nikola Jokic. He's on his way to becoming the best player in basketball, right? If they win this series, I think he'll earn that crown from Giannis because the championships do matter.
Yeah.
Jamal Murray has been a good regular season player, right? His career has been 7 years. He's played in 410 games. He's had some injury concerns. 410 games. He's averaged 16.9 points, 3.7 rebounds, and 4.2 assists per game in his career. Those are good numbers, not great numbers. He's never been chosen for an all-star game. He's been a good player. When you get to the postseason, he's played 51 postseason games. His averages are 25.4 points, 5 rebounds, and 6.2 assists per game. So you look at the jump in his postseason numbers, he's averaging 8.5 more points per game in the postseason, 1.3 more rebounds, and 2 more assists per game. So I want to start the hashtag playoff Jamal. The hell with playoff Jimmy. It's playoff Jamal.
Yeah, he's like, what was the nickname they gave? Len Fournette, the running back for the Buccaneers the past couple of years. It was playoff Lenny. Stepped it up in the playoffs. So maybe Jamal Murray's the equivalent of that in the NBA. But yeah, Steph, I mean, he's been fantastic for the most part in the playoffs, and obviously he was fantastic last night. As far as what you're saying about Butler and Adebayo, I think they shot so much, Steph, because as a more of a product of those role players, again, who killed the Celtics, were shooting the ball terribly. Gabe Vincent, 2 of 10 from the floor, 1 of 6 from 3. Max Strus, 1 of 7 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3. Caleb Martin was 4 of 9 from the floor. So that those guys were not shooting the ball efficiently at all. So I think it led to Butler and Adebayo having to take more shots. And you're right, they were not particularly efficient. And in fairness, nobody looks particularly efficient when they're playing against Nikola Jokic. In the second half, Sap, it was like he couldn't miss a shot. And that's not that unusual for him. Trick shots, 3-pointers in the post. He has it all. And they were commenting this on the broadcast too. Just like the touch is amazing. It'll hit the side of the rim and somehow he puts enough spin on it where it'll roll back right into the net. So, I mean, you really can't say enough about those 2-star players from the Nuggets, Sap. They've yet to get their third banana, Michael Porter Jr. going in this series at all, as he was awful again shooting last night. He's been okay defensively, pretty good, I would say, but has not been able to shoot the basketball. And the one other thing, Sap, I want to say too about this game is we were talking about how you could tell the winner by the 3-point percentage. That wasn't the case last night. The other night, rather, both teams shot pretty dreadfully from 3. The Nuggets 5 of 18, just about 28%. and the Heat 11 of 35, 31%. But where the Nuggets were able to pull away, Sap, was 33 rebounds for the Miami Heat, 58 for the Denver Nuggets. When it's that big of a margin, it's virtually impossible to win.
Jokic nearly out-rebounded the Heat by himself, right? Because the Heat had 33 rebounds. The Joker had 21. Incredible. And you're talking about Jokic's touch around the basket or in the mid-range or even from three. I saw Kevin McHale play a long time for the Boston Celtics, 13 years. It never appeared that he took a bad shot. Like, even great players take bad shots. LeBron will take this pull-up three that is an air ball or kind of clunks off the back of the rim and it looks terrible. You don't see many bad shots from Kevin Durant, but occasionally you do. I never saw Kevin McHale take a bad shot. It's the same thing with Nikola Jokic, because even his misses look like they're right on target and pretty, and he gets so many fortuitous rolls, and a lot of that is touch. He's incredible to watch, and now that you have Jokic playing at that level, as he has been for years, and Jamal Murray gets to the postseason and escalates his game, do they really even need a third guy to chip in? As long as those guys play defense and maybe hit some open threes, that should be enough to get them over the finish line. The refreshing thing, Jet, Denver had trouble shooting from three the other night, so they stopped taking threes. They were 5 of 18. When's the last time you saw? Yeah, when's the last time you saw a team take 18 threes and win a game in the playoffs? Certainly not the Celtics, because if that was the Celtics playing, they would have just been jacking them up, and somehow they would have blown a double-digit lead. But Denver's doing what they do best, which is get the ball in the hands of Nikola Jokic, also Jamal Murray, and those guys make all the right decisions. Murray has had 10 assists in each of the first 3 games of the series. Incredible.
Yeah, really incredible. And they got a strong performance from a role player last night in their rookie, actually, Christian Brown, 15 points off the bench, 7 of 8 shooting. And that happens in the finals, Sap. You get I remember the Celtics had a win over the Lakers in the finals when they eventually won the championship that year in 08, with Leon Poe had a huge game off the bench. Mm-hmm. This will happen in a game where maybe an unheralded player will come in and they'll be a big factor in the win. Nikola Jokic said Christian Brown won us the game. I wouldn't go that far, considering the 2 guys who had 30-point triple doubles. But it was sort of a little bit of a taste of the Heat's own medicine, where just a guy kind of out of nowhere is lighting you up, and it was enough for Denver again to take a 2-1 lead, regain home court advantage, and now tonight. Game 4 is sort of a must-win for Miami now. Not sort of, it is.
It is, yeah, because if you get down 3-1, Denver's going to take care of business. Whether it's in Game 5 back in Denver or Game 6 in Miami, Miami's now lost 3 straight home games in the postseason, Games 4 and 6 to the Celtics, Game 3 to Denver, so they don't really have a huge home court advantage. We know it's a late arriving crowd and an early leaving crowd, because that's the way it is in Miami. They do have a good fan base and a good brand, but it's not at the same level as, say, the Warriors or the Celtics or even the Lakers. Those fan bases are more invested than the Heat fan base. But yeah, just watching Jokic and Murray play off each other was also a pretty amazing thing. We always talk about the Celtics and Lakers at some point in a podcast, right? So let's continue that streak. Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic have had a grand total of 27 assists to each other in the first 3 games of this series. Jokic getting an assist on a Murray make, Murray getting an assist on a Jokic make. 27. That's extraordinary. That's 9 per game. Do you want to guess how many assists Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown had to each other in a 7-game Eastern Conference Finals? Take a guess. Yeah, I'm talking 7 games. Again, Jokic and Murray, 27 assists to each other in 3 games. That's an average of 9. How many did Tatum and Brown have to each other in 7 games? Total.
I'm going to say the same number that has been in 3 games, so 27.
6.
Yeah, that's not good, Sap. That's a bad number.
That's less than 1 per game, Jet.
So, in fairness, Sap, they were probably honoring Bill Russell. His number was 6.
Or LeBron James.
Maybe.
You knew I'd have to mention LeBron at some point.
Sure,
podcast, right?
Yeah.
That's what I do. But
yeah, that's bad.
That's startling. Like, I think you and I would have more assists to each other if we were on the court in a 7-game series. And again, we're going to spend the summer, should the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown? Should they give him the Supermax? Those guys just don't play off of each other. It's like they have 2 all-pro quarterbacks, and one is playing the first and third quarter, and the other one's playing the second and the fourth quarter. It'd be better to get rid of one of those all-pro quarterbacks and get, I don't know, a good wide receiver, a good tight end, a good left tackle, so the offense would work. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in future podcasts. But when I saw those numbers, I like, these can't be right. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, not good at all. Somebody that might be able to help with that issue, Sap, actually just got waived. Chris Paul, right as we ended our podcast the other day, was waived by the Phoenix Suns, and now his future is completely up in the air in terms of where he's going to be next year. There is a chance he returns to Phoenix through some mechanism of the CBA. I did not think that you were allowed to waive a player and then re-sign them. In football, you are. But apparently he can. It's very complicated. Even I don't really understand it. But we'll go off the assumption that he's not returning to Phoenix, Sap. And, Chris Paul, all-time great player, all-time great point guard, definitely has slowed down a bit, but still has, I think, a lot of good basketball left in him. And his services will be in pretty high demand, probably for a team that is not going to have to rely on playing him so many minutes, and that he can maybe, work on his rest a little bit and conditioning and get into the postseason and actually be healthy for once. So, Sap, one, what was your initial reaction to Chris Paul being waived? And two, where are the best fits for Chris Paul at this point in his career?
I was surprised, but it appears to me that new owner Matt Ishbia is willing to clean house in a sense. He fired Monty Williams, who's a acclaimed, successful, popular coach. He moved on from him. He has Kevin Durant. He traded a lot to acquire him from Brooklyn at the trade deadline. He has Devin Booker, so he's going to build around those two guys. DeAndre Ayton could be moved in the offseason, their starting center. So it doesn't look like Phoenix is frightened to make these big, impactful moves. So I was surprised. I did put a poll out at John Sapp 25. Will Chris Paul be in the 2023-2024 season? I put out the Lakers, the Clippers, the Celtics, and the Heat. LA is always appealing because he has a home there.
Yeah.
And every time there's a veteran player, they're going to be tied to LeBron and to a lesser degree, the Clippers as well. The Celtics, I think, need a true point guard. And Chris Paul is still darn good. Again, he's 38 years old. You probably have to limit him to 1,200 to 1,400 minutes during the regular season. So he's at his best in the postseason. And also the Miami Heat have that culture that people talk about. They could use a point guard, and it seems like every veteran player wants to play there. It's Miami. It's an appealing place. You've got Jimmy Butler. You've got the best coach in the business in Eric Spoelstra. Pat Riley runs things. A lot of veterans want to go there. So I put it out there for those four teams. The first place I thought of was the Lakers because of his connection with LeBron James. So if you put Chris Paul, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis together, that could work, but you need to keep these guys healthy and on the court together. I think LeBron and Chris Paul would work because I think Chris Paul needs to go to a place where someone's already won championships. So it's not a lot of pressure on him, and he doesn't necessarily have to be the alpha. In Phoenix, until Durant got there, he was playing with guys who hadn't won championships. So there was no talking back to Chris Paul. Whereas I think if he goes to the Lakers, and to even a degree the Clippers, because you have Kawhi Leonard, he'd be playing with a player who is better than him, whether it be in the terms of history of the NBA or currently, and also a guy who's won more than him. So I think those are two interesting places. If he comes to the Celtics, he's coming to a place where the players have no championships. And it seems to me like a pretty tough young group to deal with, right? When you're talking about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon to some degree, Grant Williams. I mean, could you picture a room filled with Chris Paul, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, and Grant Williams? I mean, first of all, it's like
Congress
council. It is like Congress, exactly. I mean, they couldn't agree on where to go to dinner because a lot of smart guys there. I mean, that's like the executive council of the Players Association, for God's sake. So, I don't know if that would necessarily be a fit. I think the Heat would be a fit because it seems like they can really deal with a lot of these players. But the Lakers is the first place because, again, I'm a LeBron guy and it would be intriguing. We know he and LeBron have a great relationship, but now you've got two 38-year-old guys. I mean, what's the chance those guys are going to be at their best in the postseason?
Yeah, I think the Lakers are the first team that popped in my head too for, two reasons. One, it's LA. So, obviously that's a huge draw. And two, Chris Paul and LeBron have a very well-documented, long-standing, close friendship. So that would make a lot of sense from that perspective. Also, the Lakers need a point guard. I mean, I know they have LeBron James, but they, could use a point guard. Chris Paul, obviously, you can plug in right away. I don't think the Lakers are particularly interested in retaining D'Angelo Russell's services after that postseason he had. So let's just go off the assumption that they want him to be, that they would like Chris Paul to be, their starting point guard. I think that would work really well. Like you said, Miami, he should fit in like a glove. I do think part of Chris Paul's being in mantra or MO is he does like to be in situations where he is not necessarily alpha, but yes, to a certain degree, but like kind of the dad, the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got a lot of coach in him. A lot of people think he's going to be a coach someday. Maybe not. So I do think that the challenge of Boston actually could be appealing to him in a certain way, and saying, they had the most talented roster in the league this year. They fell short. They have a coach who doesn't necessarily really know what he's doing. I could be the guy that comes in and makes this work. I think that is something that, based off of what I know and what I think I know about Chris Paul, could be appealing to him. Saying, I'm the missing piece there, and we can win a championship with this team. But he would be talking about moving across the country. He has kids, so that's not necessarily an easy thing, and would be like you said, joining a team that does not have any players who have won a championship. So there would be pressure there. But his main goal now at this point in his career, Sap, is winning that elusive championship. So I think what he's ultimately going to do is, of the teams that show interest in him, probably pick the team he feels has the best chance to win a championship if he joins them. That's my assumption on his calculus, because even at this age, at 38, Sap, and if he's not the best player in the team, say he's a role player in the team, winning a championship will still do a lot for the legacy of Chris Paul. Getting that one ring will put him over the hump in terms of a lot of other players that he's talked about, even if he's not the biggest contributor on the team. So I think that's his main priority. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the calculus right now for Chris Paul.
He's clearly a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now,
yes.
2 years ago, when Phoenix was up 2-0 over Milwaukee in the finals, the debate began, is he a top 5 point guard? I think he's right around 5 or 6 if we're going to power rank point guards. And again, it gets a little bit difficult because there are certain guards that are, I'd call combo guards. Like, I'll go back in history. Was Jerry West really a point guard or an off guard? He kind of did it all. So, it's difficult to judge what he goes into. Is Steph Curry a point guard or an off guard? I think he's kind of a combo guard. He's too good a shooter to be a pure point guard, but he's still such a great ball handler and passer that, he's not just a pure shooting guard like, say, Klay Thompson is. So that's a debate that we can have down the road. Yes, I think he needs that championship because he doesn't want to be on a list with Karl Malone and Charles Barkley and Elgin Baylor and James Harden as the greatest players in the history of the sport without a championship. You don't want to be on that list. Kind of like Alex Ovechkin 5 years ago broke through and won a Stanley Cup, because up until that point, I thought he was the greatest player in NHL history without a Stanley Cup, but he broke through 5 years ago and he's not on that list anymore. So, yeah, the Celtics would offer that opportunity. He's 4 years older than the head coach, Joe Mazzulla. His basketball knowledge is through the roof, right? I think
way higher than Joe Mazzulla's, yes.
Right. I mean, I think in terms of basketball IQ, I'd say Chris Paul, LeBron, Nikola Jokic, maybe James Harden, who doesn't show up in big games, but I think his basketball IQ is extraordinary. Maybe Trae Young is a pure passer. Those are like the best passers in the sport. And Luka, yeah. There's probably 6 guys there that are just, at times probably frustrating to play with, because they're like 2 steps ahead of everybody else. Could you picture Chris Paul and LeBron James on the court together? The 3 other guys on the court are going to feel like they're, jamming with McCartney and Lennon or whatever. It's not going to be an easy thing to accomplish. You're going to have to learn what those guys do. Sorry for the old reference of the Beatles, but, whatever.
The Beatles are timeless, Sap.
They were pretty good, right? Yeah, they were pretty good. So, yeah, that's an interesting point. But I think if he looks at the offense, and if Joe Mazzulla is going to have this heavy imprint on the offense of jacking up threes and being stagnant and an ISO type offense, Chris Paul's not going to be interested in that. I mean, yeah, if Chris Paul's running the offense and Tatum and Brown move without the basketball and he gets them both involved and they start to play off each other, that could really be interesting.
It could. And I mean, historically, Chris Paul has, in his prime and the past couple of years in Phoenix, he does make players around him better because he is that pure point guard. And so if he can elevate Jason Tatum's game even further and Jaylen Brown's game even further, the Celtics will be in position to win a championship. But he again, like you said, he may look at the situation and say, God, it's just too frustrating to handle, regardless of how good their roster is. But he's gonna have options, and seemingly they're all good options. If he joins the Heat, they're in the finals right now. Who's to say they wouldn't get back to the finals next year with him and potentially win it? If he joins the Lakers, they were in the Western Conference Finals. They have LeBron, they have Anthony Davis, should have a good chance of winning it. The Clippers with those two wings should have a good chance of winning it. So all of the options he has are pretty strong options, Sap. And so, despite his age and despite the fact that he is not the same player he used to be, he's still a very good, very high quality NBA player. He's going to make an impact on a team that has championship aspirations. And that's why it's such a fascinating roster move, is that you don't see players who are going to have big impacts in determining the NBA champion just released. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it's going to come relatively cheap for whichever team wants to sign him. You don't have to give up compensation. And maybe at this point in his career, Chris Paul says, I've made a ton of money. I'll play for less than I'm probably worth, although he was the president of the Players Association. So he's going to have to weigh that decision with what he's done in the past as the president of the Players Association. I mean, you could throw out a bunch of teams and say that Chris Paul would be a pretty nice fit. I mean, if Harden moves on from Philadelphia, maybe Philadelphia is a nice fit.
Yeah.
New Orleans, would he go back there to play with Zion if Zion ever plays? Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, that would be an interesting team as well. So the thing I like about Chris Paul is he's always been a quick fix, except for when he went to Houston. Although when he went to Houston, that first year there, they were probably the best team in basketball, and they led Golden State 3-2 in the Western Conference Finals, and then his hamstring popped, and they lost games 6 and 7. Golden State went back to the finals and beat LeBron and the Cavaliers. Remember when he went to Oklahoma City for 1 year and it looked like the Thunder
turned the whole
tanking?
team around. Yeah,
he got them into the playoffs, and I believe they lost a 7-game series to Utah or someone. But he had them right in contention in the postseason. As soon as he went to Phoenix, they made the finals his first year. Second year, they win 64 games. He's a guy who can fit in quickly because of his high basketball IQ, and I think he also fits better quicker than slower because I think he grates on people after a while. Probably by the third year in Phoenix, I'm sure maybe Devin Booker had grown tired of him, or Monty Williams was now gone from Phoenix, but they probably grew tired of him because he can be a difficult guy to play with because he is so smart, so demanding. It's almost like having a quarterback in the NFL who, after a period of time, the receivers are like, I get you. I'm tired of hearing your, chirping and all your nonsense. So wherever he goes, he'll probably do quite well right away, provided he stays healthy.
Yeah, and that's harder, when he hasn't won a championship. They go, okay, well, you obviously don't know everything because you haven't won a championship. So that, it's certainly, I think he does great on people after a time. But wherever he signs, he's going to have a major impact on that team because it's going to be a team that's already talked about as a potential championship contender, and he'll just elevate them further. And we got some other news in terms of another point guard, all-time great point guard who
has never won anything either.
Who's also never won anything either. Damian Lillard, whose name, the past 5 or 6 years has been talked about as a potential trade target. Maybe this is the offseason that Portland moves on from him. So he did an interview with Chris Haynes who's on Showtime, talking about what he's expecting this offseason, what he wants. He's made clear multiple times, and he made clear again this interview, his first choice and priority is to stay in Portland to try to build a winner with the Trailblazers. That's great. That's not happening. They don't have the ability to suddenly make a championship contender out of that team. So I again, I'm kind of giving spoilers here. I think he's going to end up staying there because I don't think they want to trade him, and I don't think he's super motivated to be traded. But they did ask him, in the event that you do get traded and the Trailblazers start from scratch, where do you want to go? And he gave an interesting answer, Sap. He said 2 teams specifically, the Nets and the Heat. As you mentioned earlier, everybody wants to go to the Heat. That's just, everybody seems to want to go there. It's a great place to live, warm, beautiful women, really competent organization, and competitive every single year. The Nets, a little bit more confusing. He said he was really close with Miles Bridges, which doesn't seem like a good reason to just go to a team. And he did omit the Celtics completely. And then a word came out from Haynes afterwards saying that Lillard wouldn't want to go to the Celtics, maybe for the reasons you just said before, Sap. But should Damian Lillard get traded, I would imagine, like Chris Paul, the goal would be go to a team where I can win a championship. Then the Heat, totally, that makes sense. The Nets, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, and I also think that Portland would trade him out of conference, so you eliminate all the Western Conference teams, and you'd have to give Portland quite a bit back in compensation to get Dame Lillard. He's a high-priced player as well. It's a little different with Chris Paul, who, once he's released, if he's released, is a free agent. Whereas Damian Lillard's still under contract. I think it's great that an NBA player, while under contract, talks about getting traded to certain teams. I love that.
Only
That's
in
fantastic.
the NBA.
Only in the NBA. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, after it was clear that Green Bay was going to move on from him, started talking about going to the Jets. So he was still technically under contract, but we all knew that Green Bay wanted to move on from Rodgers. And, you know, Rodgers being the way he is, very thin-skinned, said, well, I want to go play with the Jets.
Right.
So we look at Damian Lillard. The funny thing about the Celtics, because Chris Haynes was also on with Dan Patrick of Fox Sports Radio, and when Dan Patrick brought up Boston, Chris Haynes essentially just gave Patrick the Heisman and said, no, Boston's not in play. Here's a team that has perhaps the best roster in the NBA. It's been in the Eastern Conference Finals 5 out of the last 7 years. You got a lot of really good young players, and he wouldn't be interested to go to Boston. Is it the city? Is it the organization? Is it the fact that maybe Tatum and Brown aren't respected by veteran players? Obviously, Tatum and Brown are sensational players, but maybe veteran players think that they're a little too full of themselves. Is it also a case of the way the team handled the Ime Udoka crisis? Is a bad thing among players in the league? And we know that Lillard has played in Portland the last decade. Ime Udoka is from Portland. I'm sure, you know, it's a small circle and there's some connectivity there. Maybe that's a turnoff. And maybe in the end, they look at Joe Mazzulla, who's going to be back next year, and go, I'm not going to go play for some coach that I think is a buffoon.
Yeah, all those reasons, Sap, could absolutely be the case. And if you look at it, the most clear one-to-one path is that the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown and, you know, whatever, and they get Damian Lillard back. That value-wise makes sense. We've talked about this the other day, and we talked about it too on our live take. If you haven't checked that out, you can check us out on Live Take Sports app, debating whether we should trade the Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown or not. As far as Lillard, Sap, Brown for Lillard, that sort of fits what the Blazers would want, I would imagine. You know, a younger all-star caliber player. For those other teams, the Nets have a ton to trade in terms of draft capital now after, you know, moving on from Kevin Durant and getting a ton of picks from the Phoenix Suns and moving on from Kyrie Irving and getting, I think, a pick from the Dallas Mavericks. So they have a lot of draft capital and younger players to move there. That would be attractive to a rebuilding team in the Portland Trail Blazers if they go that route. But for the Heat, Sap, and again, I totally get why Lillard wants to go there and why all these veteran players want to go there. They don't really have anything of value to trade. I don't think Tyler Hero has a ton of value in the league, and he's got a pretty high contract now because he signed a large extension after last offseason. I don't think teams look at him as a guy that's like a real difference maker. I know he's won Sixth Man of the Year, but I don't think that's nearly enough to get a player of the caliber of Damian Lillard. So I don't know what the mechanism for Miami to get Lillard would be. For Boston, it's pretty clear. For Brooklyn, it's pretty clear, but not for Miami.
No, I mean, the best asset Miami has going forward is probably Bam Adebayo, and that's the reason that Damian Lillard wants to go to Miami.
Right,
so I don't think he wants to go to Miami and see Bam Adebayo at the airport. When he arrives, Bam Adebayo is taking a flight out to Portland. That wouldn't work. Jimmy Butler, he's not going anywhere. I mean, he's a valuable asset, but because he's a veteran player with a lot of miles on him, he's more valuable to the Heat than anyone else. Whereas Adebayo could bring back something in trade, but obviously that wouldn't be Damian Lillard because Lillard wants to go there because he's close with Bam Adebayo. I think that with Lillard, he's probably going to end up staying there because he is very comfortable there. And the Blazers do have the third pick, but this is the year you wanted that first pick with Victor Wembanyama coming out. Obviously, there's a big drop off from Big Vic to the second and third picks. you still might get a really good player with that third pick, but is it going to be enough to make Portland a contender?
Yeah, they're not going to help
deep
Lillard.
Western Conference. No, not at all. By the time that player is ready to contribute at a high level, he'll be 36, not 33. He probably is going to end up staying there. He just could be one of those guys that spends his entire career in one place, doesn't win anything, makes a boatload of money, is a god in Portland. I mean, he's probably the most popular Trailblazer ever. And
Yes.
Bill Walton's the guy who led them to a championship in 1977. And by all accounts, and I've seen both of these guys play, Clyde Drexler better than Damian Lillard career-wise, without question. But Lillard is the most popular Blazer ever. So I think that chances are he just stays there.
Yeah, this is what I've been explaining to people who've been asking me the Lillard question for a few years, because, I lived in Oregon for a while, and I keep close tabs on the Blazers, and I have a lot of friends that are Blazers fans. And again, I lived in the city or nearby for a while. This is why I've never thought that they were going to trade him, because they're the only game in town, Sap. They're the only professional team. Well, now they have an MLS team, but of the four major sports, it's the only game in town. And the Blazers fans are really loyal. They love the team. They do well, but part of it's because he's so popular there, Sap. Even when they're not good, they sell tickets, they put butts in seats, they sell jerseys. Like you said, he's kind of a god there. If they were to trade him and start this whole new rebuilding thing, it would be a painful few years for the Blazers organization, where it's hard to get interest going in the team, even though they're the only game in town, because he's such an attraction and he's so beloved that even when they're not doing well, people want to see the Blazers and are paying their hard-earned money to go see the Blazers because they want to see Dame Lillard. So when you're talking about a smaller market team like that, and especially a team in a city that's the only game in town, the calculus is a little different. It's not necessarily championship or bust. It's how do we keep the fan interest alive and make sure that we're getting eyeballs on the team. And even though we're the only game in town, we need to captivate these fans. We can't have them drifting off and doing something else. So it's a little bit of a different mentality than other teams have. And so I just have never felt like they were super inclined to trade the Blazers, especially Sap too. Their ownership situation is very confusing. Paul Allen died a few years ago. Technically, his sister, Jody Allen, owns the team as part of the trust, but also the trust said that she had to sell the team. She's been resistant, but not really hands-on with the team. There's an article, I think, last week that Phil Knight, the former CEO of Nike, and basically the president of Oregon, the state, not just the school, it wants to buy the Blazers and has made several offers, and she's turned them down. He can afford to buy the Blazers, no problem. The league, believe me, would love to have him as an owner, and have that Nike connection in there. But for whatever reason, she's been resisting the terms of the will of the trust that her brother set up. So I'm not sure exactly who's running the show there, how they're running the show, why they're running the show, and so the whole situation is very strange in Portland, Sap.
I would think the value of that franchise is similar to the value of the Phoenix Suns, which just got sold for $4 billion a few months ago. Right. I mean, a smaller market than Phoenix, but still a rabid fan base. So even if it's 10% less than what the Suns went for, you're talking $3.8 billion, somewhere in that range. Obviously, with the amount of money that Paul Allen had, that's just part of his portfolio. Also, the Seattle Seahawks were part of that portfolio, or are part of that portfolio.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe they're going to be sold at some point for probably, I don't know, $6 billion, because the Washington Commanders just went for more than that. And the Seahawks have a pretty good brand. I mean, you could just cash out if that's what you want to do. Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff, because that's the only pro team other than the MLS team. So let's put them to the side. And that's a growing sport. I'm not disparaging it, but it's still not the same as, a Major League Baseball team or certainly an NFL team. It's very important to that community, the Trailblazers, and they've been popular ever since they really came about in the late 60s, early 70s, won a championship within the first decade of their existence. And they've been a pretty well-run organization, but they just can't quite break through because, let's face facts, you're in a conference where San Antonio, the Lakers, and Golden State have pretty much dominated the last 25 years. They did make the conference finals back in 2018, got swept by Golden State. That's as far as they've gone with Damian Lillard. So, yeah, sometimes you just want to hold on to that asset to be relevant. Maybe you get into the play-in tournament. Maybe you get into the playoffs. you sell some tickets to the playoffs, and you're talked about in the city. You don't want to go all the way to the bottom and try to rebuild by trading Damian Lillard, and now you fall out of favor with your fan base. So I think that's why there's a real good chance that Lillard is playing for Portland next season.
Yeah, and obviously he's a guy that a lot of teams want. He was named to the top 75 all NBA team last year.
Which I disagreed with. I don't think he belonged on that list. Yeah, now there were 76 players on that. He may have come in at number 76, and I'm guessing that Reggie Miller was number 75. Did Reggie Miller make it?
He did.
Okay, yeah, I don't think he belonged there either. I thought Klay Thompson belonged on that list more so than those two players because of all the championships, but that's another discussion for another day. But he's still an all-time great player, without question.
Yeah. So, again, a lot of teams will be calling the Blazers, but I'm suspicious of their actual intent to trade him. I think it's far more likely they trade that number 3 pick and do some sort of stopgap measure. If I were them, I would trade Lillard and just start from scratch. It's obviously... Right. The goal should be to win a championship, but again, their calculus is different. So we'll see. I agree with you that he'll stay there. I think that far more likely that number 3 pick is going to be on the move. We'll see what exactly happens there, but it is certainly interesting, and Portland will have a big offseason ahead of them. So we'll keep an eye on them, and we'll keep an eye on everything. And the NBA Finals again, Game 4 tonight. We'll be reacting to it after it happens. So make sure you check out our social medias at John Sapp. At Jetstrike. You're at John Sapp 25, right?
Yes.
Okay. I almost forgot the number for a second. I got it now. And at Jetstryer.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And you can check out Full Press Coverage's website for all sorts of great content, as always. And you can find us wherever podcasts are found. Pick and Roll NBA Podcast with Jet and Sapp. We'll be back next week with more NBA Finals reaction, NBA rumors. We'll see what other players who are currently on contract with one team are going to talk about playing for other teams. Who's next to say that? Believe me, it'll be somebody. And so lots to talk about. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you later. See ya.